My talk is really on maximising ecological restoration through a threatened species program. This site here at Numbamba has been referenced a few times today through the plenary talks, and I want to demonstrate a little bit more of some of the fabulous results that are occurring out there due to a threatened species program. So the background of the project occurred through the raising of Hinds Dam on the Gold Coast, which impacted about 500 hectares of native vegetation, including 313 hectares of koala and remnant vegetation. In that process, it also impacted and inundated excuse me, 6 nationally environmental significant species. So the onion cedar, spiny gardenia, the 2 macadamias that occur on the southern part of the Gold Coast, the shiny plectranthus and the shrubby jasmine. So at that time, when I did work with City of the Gold Coast, I made it a point to jump on the technical advisory group for the project and directly influence and hopefully be involved in that program. And essentially that facilitated the development and design of the Threatened Species Program in conjunction with other experts, negotiation of the sites, so those receiving sites that they would go on to, and there was actually 2 receiving sites. I'm going to concentrate on one today. The development of a 10-year budget, which is, I think all of us know in this room, is crucial to seeing some success at least. And sourcing additional and strategic land for the purchase of an offset, which actually occurred by linking Springbrook and Lamington, so really key to this program. So we developed a whole lot of plans, including a restoration plan, updating the management plan, and some strategic fire planning, as well as in situ fire planning as well. So a little bit of background on Numbamba Conservation Area. It's a 590 hectare site owned and managed by City of the Gold Coast, purchased in 2002 with the Conservation Levy, contains 12 regional ecosystems and 3 of those are listed of concern, and it connects Springbrook with the Numbamba Valley via also including another valley which Waterfall Creek runs through. 465 flora species identified so far, 28 fauna species, of which 28 that are considered either endangered, vulnerable or rare. And that vegetation on site ranges from rainforest, sclerophyll systems all the way through to some open paddock. It's pretty degraded to start with due to previous logging disturbance, cattle grazing and then subsequent weed invasion. So works began there in 2008. Part of the funding for this project really assisted getting a really good bushfire management plan underway, and that was essential to protecting these threatened species, not only the ones that were being propagated and installed on site, but also to protect those sensitive areas that they were being placed into, as well as those buffering areas around them. Obviously it helps facilitate the protection of life and property as well. And then a restoration plan was developed and adopted in 2010, which contains all the strategy for the whole site. So how to restore the whole nearly 600 hectares as well as manage those threatened species. So everything from seed collection and propagation and translocation right the way through to the monitoring program. And a nature refuge has also been placed over those areas to protect them in perpetuity. So that's a quick squiz of the site. This site is not on there, neither is this one, but you can see the wonderful connectivity between Apple Tree Park and other sites in Springbrook. It is essentially this area here. And this is an updated photo, so you can still see there's still some open areas to be managed. And this was part of the restoration plan, was really breaking that site up into zones, or precincts, zones, sub-zones, to really try and assist systematic work. Really essential when you have some of the weed issues that are impacting this site. So I'm just going to run through these because I also, apart from the Great Threatened Species program that's going there, I think one of the things we need to do as a group of people is really look at the variable ways we can get funding to facilitate greater restoration as well as protect our threatened species. So in the 2-for-1 requirement for the offset, 857 spiny gardenias were installed. are still alive, which is still above the 2-for-1 requirement. And in order to try and assist with some of that natural attrition, we actually popped in an extra 30% of those threatened species in day one. And with the spiny gardenia, because they have proven to be the most challenging out of the 4 species placed on site, there's probably going to be some additional planting with them down the track. So there's 23 plots created, and that's one of the before and after shots, and that's a little more recent in 2013. You can see that same plot on the right. Obviously management's ongoing, so not only weed management, but also a little bit of management around common cissus coming in and wanting to fill those gaps. Annual monitoring is also part of this program. And you can see a couple of shots there. The onion cedar, fabulous tree, 106 plants installed over 4 plots. Again, all those areas where these plants are installed were impacted by weeds. Currently a 97% survival rate, so that's 39 plants above that 2-to-1 ratio. Again, with ongoing management, weed control and monitoring occurring. And the shiny plectranthus, a little bit of a success story in this particular project. So 80 plants were required to meet that 2-for-1 status. In 2013, the monitoring approach by the federal government said, look, we'll go to an observation status now, because more than 133 plants were surviving at that time, with really clear indications that these plants were flowering, fruiting and reproducing. And so every time it rains, there's a little bit of dispersal of those plants that occur on the rock shelves and occurring downstream. And in fact, since restoration, which is probably a really good point to make, is also occurring on another creek system. So somehow they have come in, not via the same system, but have germinated post-restoration. And the Macadamia tetraphylla. I've got to acknowledge actually Hamish Corbett in this. When the plants came out of the nursery, he had enough skill and knowledge to go, that particular one and that particular one looks like it's hybridised a bit. So it was because we got a specialist macadamia grower in, so we had to cull a whole lot right at the beginning, do some more propagation and translocation. Fabulously, there are 102 plants still growing, and this year some of those trees were observed to be fruiting. So all of these plants require monitoring every year to see whether they are self-sustaining. So that is reproducing vital seed. So it's going to be a few more years yet to determine when this project can come off monitoring. So you can see just a few before and afters there. So some of the additional results that have occurred so far is not only has there been some great management around these propagated and translocated species, but it's actually increased threatened species of many other plants and fauna visiting the site. The site has improved significantly in terms of its resilience. More than 280 hectares are under active restoration maintenance at the moment, and I'll show some before and afters. Some of the photographers are actually in the audience, which is wonderful. And there's been a great improvement to some of the infrastructure around the site. So, fire trails, creek crossings, the ability to access sites and continue to manage these areas. 10 prescribed burns have been implemented. And that is not only just a burn popped in, really, really good planning, great site preparation, and key to it all, good follow-up weed control. So rather than molasses grass and lantana and the like reshooting and, filling those gaps again, it's actually germinating native grasses and a whole lot of natives coming back in their place. So a bit of a win-win there. It's also been a really great demonstration site to the wider community. The QPW, or Queensland Parks and Wildlife Great Walk, goes through that site. And in the early days, not a lot of people thought you could restore this site using assisted natural regeneration. So it's been a really wonderful site, and now it is being studied widely. So it's really great to see. Some great partnerships have also occurred between governments, so particularly SEQ Water and City of Gold Coast, as well as the many, many contractors and Gold Coast staff that are working on that site. So at the moment, you can see on this particular diagram here, this is the site, all broken up into zones. The purple areas are where the nature refuge has been placed over certain parts of the site. That's where some of the threatened species have been installed. I can't tell you exactly where they are, or I'll have to kill you. In addition, we've got all these blue areas here are areas that are currently being worked. So not only is works occurring on that site, but also adjacent to that. So again, that continual improvement of resilience right across the area continues today. The hashed areas here is where all the burns have been occurring. So very steep country and very dry west-facing country as well. So a couple of before and after photos just to further demonstrate some of the great opportunities that this project's provided. So even though that lantana on the left in September 2009 looks dead, it's not. It was just a bit stressed, and in fact much lantana looks like that at the moment. These photos came from Bushland Restoration Services. And you can see that because the threatened species were placed in certain areas, really needed to keep creating buffers and then really starting to join up areas. So these are just a few little snapshots of taking areas from one condition through to another. Couple of other shots there. It's pretty clear, the changes, and now these sites, you know, that's already the aftershot 2012. These shots are, these areas are now quite full and developing rainforest in many areas, or wet sclerophyll in other areas, and on a great trajectory. Some other ones there. This patch on in this shot is actually an old banana farm and has often been a bit slow to get started, but that shot on June 2012 is now filled with vegetation, so that whole forest edge has moved right out. One of the great other advantages of doing these larger scale projects, if they're around, is on this site through a lot of large scale weed control, fuel has been significantly reduced. So the threat of wildfire through these areas was a massive threat to not only the sensitive ecosystems on this site, but areas around it. So this is along Waterfall Creek, and some great before and afters. Some great shots here. I want to acknowledge Saul, who started this one, and I'm going to just quickly flick through them. You can see for yourself, and Darcy Forster also continuing the great work with his team there. This one I saw on one this morning and gets around because it is a wonderful shot of assisted regeneration. You can see the flooded gum in the back there soon gets enveloped by beautiful native vegetation. And again here with the flooded gum, you can see that's your constant point in this shot and soon gets done. So just a couple of minutes to really acknowledge some wonderful people that have been involved in this. Darren Roach, I don't know if he's here, but has been sort of a really wonderfully consistent person throughout the 10 years and continues to facilitate some wonderful work through this. To the natural areas teams who have not only planted along the creek to assist connectivity across the site, but worked really tirelessly on a pretty hot and steep site. Also BRS, who really led the way in restoration. When we started, we needed some bloody good regenerators in there to prove what was possible, and they've been able to do that, as well as the Ecological teams and at least 4 other companies that have been involved, Seqwater, and the many people have been involved today, and you know, it's 280 hectares so far. I'm sure the rest will get done over the next 10 years. Thanks very much. I can field one question.
What planting layout did you do with the threatened species? Just monoculture, or did you mix a range of species?
Yeah, great question. We just put them in the various plots. So there was a lot of work done behind the scenes to determine where they were best suited. So really trying to put them into their natural or their niche habitat. And then we just cleared really the weeds and put them in together, but various plots to try and spread that risk, really. Yeah, so together, but natives are with them now already. Yeah.